to another episode of Real Estate Real Talk with me, your host, Gilson Torquato. Our guest today is Estelle Meiring, director at Paragon Group, an architecting firm which has been changing the landscape of South African architecture for over 15 years and showing the world that South African architects can compete on a global basis. Estelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thanks for that compliment.
Recognition has to be given, you guys have been doing some great stuff. And before we start, I'd just like you to tell me a little bit about your career, how you got started in architecture, and how your journey has been up to this moment in time.
Sure. I've been with Paragon for a very long time, almost 15 years. So I'm part of the furniture. Before that, I worked in Pretoria for a little bit, and I worked in London for a little bit. But really, I feel like my career kind of pushed off when I started at Paragon. Our company, we're best known probably for our commercial work. So we've done a lot of head offices in the past. Alexander Forbes, Discovery, Interiors, Cecil. But we actually do quite a range of buildings. I do quite a bit of educational buildings. We do quite a bit of industrial also. It's quite a range of stuff that we get involved in.
Tell me a bit more about the Cecil building. How was it designing such a building?
It was a wonderful opportunity to design such a big building. It's not something, it's something that comes around once in a lifetime. And really, I think what the challenge was for us was to take all these different divisions and put them together in a building where they could work together better and kind of more coherently. And I think that's one of the things that convinced them about this specific design. We obviously also, we looked at the logo and we looked at the image and we tried to get the architecture to match to that.
Okay. And how much research do you put into designing such a building? Because you have did you guys do the outside as well, the exterior?
Cecil, yes, yeah. We did everything on Cecil. We did only in the interiors on Discovery.
Okay.
Including the atriums and the toilets, but we did everything on Cecil, interiors and exteriors. Goodness, it's a lot of research and a lot of hours. I often think that people who are not involved in the built environment have no idea how many hours and hours of workshops and teamwork it takes. We did a lot. We went overseas. We went to see facade manufacturers overseas, in Germany, in Dubai, in England. We showed them our work. They were quite surprised at what we were doing in South Africa, which was great. We weren't behind at all, but we looked at their systems. It's quite a job to get the building to where it's standing today.
I could imagine. What are the difficulties? What are the difficulties that you face when suggesting such type of designs to your clients? I've driven past your Bala World showroom off the R21, and that is not a conventional showroom for those big yellow trucks and earth moving equipment. How do you convince your client that that's the look that they must adopt? That's the look of the future. How do you do that?
The design has to speak for itself, we don't, when we present a new idea, we don't say, and there's this room, and there's this room, and here's this. We show them the images, and we talk more about what it's going to feel like to be in the building, and how it's going to change your life when you're in the building. And really, I think that's, and if you ask people about a lot of companies, how they choose their building, they will mention all kinds of rational reasons why they chose that specific building, but there's also an emotional response. That's hard to justify to a board, but it comes into when people look at the building. They just have to they just have to love it. You can't, if they don't like what they see, you're not going to convince them that it's a good design. So we've been lucky so far. Most of our hit rate has been pretty good. It has happened before where we pitch a certain design and the client wants to go in a different direction. That's also fine. It happens. Okay. And then we'll kind of look at a different design for them.
Okay. How was it like working on the Cape Town Stadium? The roof structure for the Cape Town Stadium. How was that?
It was lots of fun. I mean, it was at the time it was built, it was the biggest suspended glass structure in the world, and the engineering behind it is quite amazing. The whole structure is made to lift up when it's a very windy day, and then settle down again when the wind calms down. So it was fascinating, and it was fascinating also. To see the whole process. I mean, you don't get to design parts of the stadium every day. Yeah. So also quite nerve-wracking to stand on that glass on the roof and look down to the bottom of the stadium.
It's quite high, I can imagine.
Very high, very high.
And how was it? What was the Cape Town Stadium designed by international architects with cooperation with South African architects?
Yes, it was. The main design was done by a German company, and then we were a group of South African architects who helped and who did parts of the stadium. So it was a kind of a very big kind of group of architects that came together for it.
And how do you manage that? All these different ideas integrating into one big idea, and then transferring that idea to builders and engineers. How do you manage that?
I think in this case, it was very clear who the lead architects were, the German architects, which makes it a bit easier. But I think generally, people think architects design buildings and they draw buildings. Of course we do that, but there's a huge human element to it. We generally have to work very well in teams. There's a vision of what you want the building to look like, but you've got your own team in your office that have to work together. You've got your consultants that have to work together, the client and the construction team. You've got to get them to all believe in the vision and then work together. So it's kind of skills that you've got to build up over time, how to get people to collaborate and to work together to get to your vision. As the architect on your own, you're going to get nowhere.
I can imagine some builders see, oh my goodness, Paragon is doing this again. Oh, it's going to be a mission, because it's so intricate.
I hope not. Maybe, but I think we've built up very good relationships with many of the contractors over the years. We're not prima donnas. We listen to good advice. We rely very heavily on their technical knowledge. We are going to push the boundaries, so we don't take no for an answer easily from engineers or from builders. We're gonna, if you say it's hard, then we're going to go, yes, we understand it's hard. It's an interesting challenge, but how can we do it? Yeah. I think that way we've built good relationships over the years.
It's good to know that there are people out there that are up to the challenge and that will take you up on your designs. Imagine if they didn't, we wouldn't have some of the works that we have at the moment.
Absolutely, a big team to believe in that it's possible and to kind of work towards it. Yeah, we've got some fantastic guys in the country.
That's good. How was Alice Lane? I know that was a 3-phase project. How was that, designing that?
It was wonderful to get to design all the buildings in the development over time, and I think what's made it quite successful in the end is that we also got to design the spaces between the buildings and made it quite a public, accessible space. And I think a lot of credit to the owners who let us open up the space to the street. There's sometimes this perception in South Africa that to be safe, you've got to have gates and kind of fences everywhere. But really, sometimes spaces are more safe when it's open. People can see what's going on. So I think, that's made it an interesting development, and one that's different from a lot of the other developments in Sandton, is that whole piazza space between the buildings.
Designing of your projects, specifically Alice Lane, did you use virtual reality, augmented reality at all, or do you use any of that in your projects at the moment?
We use lots of that. How much we used on Alice Lane, I can't remember now, but we rely heavily on it to help us visualize our designs, and also for the client to visualize it. So, the software has developed so much in the last few years that now it's possible to really, I had a meeting yesterday, and we walked the client through the groups of buildings, and we could show him what the whole space would look like and feel like, and it's really, really powerful. It's an interesting new trend. We've just done a virtual brochure for a client. It's an existing building complex, not one that we designed, and we've done a range of animations and 360 views where you can actually stand with your iPhone or your iPad, and you can look around as if you're in the space.
Okay.
And it's quite powerful, and I think that's where a lot of it is going to move. So people aren't going to drive to 10 properties to look at them. They're going to want to see them virtually and then pick one or two to go and have a look at.
Yeah, well, definitely. I could imagine it would be. It's the way of the future. It's technology. However, I have noticed. I was speaking to a few architect friends of mine, and I have noticed that there is a bit of a pullback in certain field by certain architects, saying that they don't think that it's going to pick up. They don't think that it's going to be a trend that's going to stick. It's like, why should we learn this? And what is your perspective on that?
I think we've all seen what's just happened with people working remotely during the lockdown. We basically all, in a way, working in a virtual environment at the moment, having meetings over the internet. So I don't really see how you can think that things will go back to the way they were. I think, if anything, we're going to be designing virtual meeting rooms soon, and virtual spaces that people can meet in. I think it's extremely powerful. We still design with hand sketches, but once you've got the idea to be able to model that up in 3D, add the materials and walk through the space to really feel how it's going to feel, is extremely powerful. It's a tool that architects just didn't have 15, 20 years ago. So we're lucky.
Yeah, I truly believe you're lucky, because to get the 2D to 3D to reality, so much could get lost between those three stages, that you do need some aid, from technology to just make it easier for everyone to understand.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also, sometimes you think something, you have an idea in your head, you think it's going to look great, you try it out, and it doesn't look as great, It's a bit of a trial and error thing. So it helps us, to test the ideas out.
You spoke about many architects still using sketches to start off the process. How good do you have to be at sketching or drawing to become an architect? Is it a fundamental thing, or can you get away with computer skills in today's time?
There's something special that happens between your brain and your hand when you're designing that you absolutely cannot replicate on the computer. So even young students studying today need to be encouraged to sketch, and you don't have to be an artist. I didn't even have art at school. It's not about how well you can draw a person's face or a tree. You will learn to sketch when you study it, but it's a skill that you've got to practice over and over. But absolutely, you cannot get away from hand sketching. It's the only way you can really start the concept designs. And we do multiple iterations. So we do hand sketches, it gets modeled in 3D, we take a view, we sketch over that again, it gets changed, we sketch over that again. It's a kind of iterative process that happens.
Oh, wow. And at the end, you hope to end up with a masterpiece.
Yes.
That's good.
That's the hope.
That's good. That's good. In terms of your sketches and your designs, and when you're doing your research, you focus a lot on sustainability, I presume, because it's essential for if you want to preserve the world we live in. How is it for an architect to put forth sustainable designs, and how easily are they accepted by clients, um, and how easily are they accepted by contractors?
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting that we're all very concerned about COVID-19 at the moment, but global warming is a much bigger threat to humanity that we've been ignoring to a certain extent, or parts of the world have. Yeah, I think it's become the norm to a certain extent, to design buildings, to try and design buildings that are energy efficient, that are water efficient. I don't think that's kind of rare anymore. Maybe cost is also always going to be prohibitive for certain types of interventions. And really, because we work in the commercial environment and all our buildings have to be commercially viable, you will have limitations on the things that you can do. Obviously, you've got to start with basic good design, the way your buildings are orientated, the way they deal with sun, how healthy they are for people to be in. But what's interesting now, I think, is that I think we're going to have a big movement towards sourcing more local materials. And I think that's very exciting. And I think we should all push for that, because I think we need to support the local economy and support our local suppliers. It's been a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to just specify European or overseas products for certain things because it's easy and, it's tried and tested. I think we all need to go back and rethink this and think about the carbon footprint that we're creating in the process.
That's a very, very good point. I actually never thought about that. It's a very good point. So basically, what you're telling me is that some of the designs that spec European materials, all those finishings are brought through from Europe.
Yes, some of them, not all of them, of course.
Wow.
But a lot of the kind of higher spec materials are brought through, yes, from Europe and other parts of the world. And we just have to rethink that, because it's not really necessary. We just have to start manufacturing more locally and supporting those businesses.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that speaks a lot to the sustainability, because it's a whole process. It's like from the design process to the actual building process. That must be a big carbon footprint. That must be a very big carbon footprint. Yeah. Okay. So carry on, please.
I think the other thing that is going to come to the fore a lot in the next while is repurposing buildings, reusing buildings. I think we all know that retail is taking a big knock, for example. What can we do with those spaces? If the need for office space decreases, what can we do with those buildings? How can we repurpose them? It's a lot greener to rather repurpose them than to demolish and rebuild, which is what we have been doing in the last 10, 20 years. We need to think in new ways about how we use these existing resources.
I guess it's human nature. Sometimes you just have to be pushed against the corner to innovate and to adapt, so
exactly. I think that's what makes our times now so exciting. It's a pivot point in our era, and we can use it for good. There's so many opportunities. I mean, it's a time of hardship for many people, and I don't want to downplay that. But we all need to, and I think especially as architects and designers, we have a responsibility to see the opportunities and be creative and rethink what's really important, and where we need to focus.
You spoke a bit about repurposing buildings, the potential for office demand to be down. and those spaces will most probably have to be repurposed. How do you envision architecture post this COVID phase? Because I have seen that there might be a massive reduction in office demand, which is in office space, sorry, which is currently already under pressure and was under pressure before we went into this pandemic. So, how do you think office spaces will change going forth? How do you think your office designs will change? Will you see a move from open plan offices to cubicles again? What do you envision?
Yeah, I think the first thought is, of course, office space is going to reduce because more people are going to work from home now, and I think you will see that. But also, the office space, the amount of area that people will need per person is going to increase from what it was because of social distancing. I mean, I think the trend has been in the last 10 years or so to reduce and reduce. Desks have become smaller and smaller. Area per person has become smaller. And I think we're going to see a bit of a reversal of that. So although a company might have less staff at any one time at their office, they're probably going to need more space. I think we're going to see wider corridors. I think we're going to see a movement more towards cubicle offices, probably not all cubicle offices, but more partitions between departments, for example. I think we're going to see more stairs, less lifts, because I think a lot of people are not going to want to get into a crowded lift. We might even see legislation about the minimum size per person that you can have in an office, the maximum amount of people in the lift, that kind of thing. So they're interesting times. We had this movement just before COVID-19 that was all about collaboration and shared office space. And now we've got, oh dear, all this collaboration and all this human contact is tricky. So we need to find a way to collaborate at a safe distance, which is going to be interesting. I think also, people are probably going to want to control the hygiene at their own office workspace. So things like hot desks might become problematic, and we might have to find furniture solutions that lets you carry your piece of desk with you so that somebody else can put their piece of desk down, that kind of thing. So, collaboration is still really important, and that human contact is more important than ever. I think we all crave it during lockdown. So we just need to design spaces so that we can have that in a safe way.
Oh, that's going to be interesting. That's going to be interesting. And tell me one thing, how do you envision that? Well, industrial, you can't really change much, but do you see a change in industrial? Do you see any foreseeable change in industrial real estate design?
Not so much because of COVID, but I think we're going to see a lot of increase in e-commerce. I think people who have never tried online shopping have tried it now, and my parents, for example. So I think we're gonna see a lot more distribution centers and that kind of thing coming up in the next couple of years. And I don't think the buildings will change because of this, but I think we would need more.
And in terms of sustainability with industrial buildings, just for that matter, how do you incorporate that in industrial? How do you incorporate sustainability in industrial designs?
That's a tough question. I mean, there are the obvious things like ablutions, being water wise with the ablutions and with the sanitary specifications. Some of the industrial buildings are looking at solar power now to help kind of add to their power, which is an interesting approach. I think the buildings themselves are very simple, usually the warehouse spaces, so there's not much to change there apart from natural light. Natural light is the big thing, to make sure that you design so that enough natural light can get into the building during the day so that you have very little need to switch on lights.
Okay.
That's probably the biggest one.
And with the issues that we're having with Eskom, do you incorporate solar designs in your buildings, like solar panels? Is that something that you guys look at?
Yes, we see more and more of that. I mean, the price had been quite prohibitive. which made the payback time very long for clients if you compared the capital outlay versus how long it would take to save that, on spend on electricity. But it's come down, and as the price for electricity has also risen, we're seeing it becoming more and more viable for some of our clients, and we definitely do look at that for a lot of our projects at the moment.
Okay. And while on the topic of industrial properties, can you talk to us about your property in Midway Park?
Yes, there was a industrial property that we completed about 2 years ago. It's next to the N1 highway, so it's got very nice exposure. And it's kind of divided into two, so we've got two separate tenants in the space. And it's it was a challenge for us because it has a very small office component. So often with industrial buildings, you get the wow in with the office, and then the warehouse behind is quite simple. So here we had the warehouse and almost no office. So we had to work with sheeting colors and shapes to make something interesting of quite a simple structure, which was fun.
And tell me one thing: do your industrial clients, are they crazy about the designs and so forth, or is that more reserved for your office clients?
It's a bit of a mix. I think if you ask any industrial client, they will say it's all about being practical, and you do have to get the basic principles absolutely right because it's tight. The budgets are tight, and the building has to work, and it has to be very practical. But I do still think there is that a bit of an emotional reaction when people see a picture that looks good, and the proportions are good, and the whole building speaks together well. It does, even for industrial clients, it does make a difference.
Okay, and as a parting question, if you could go back to the beginning of your career, what advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, I think a lot of people warned me that architecture goes up and down with the economy, and the amount of work that you get is up and down with the economy. And actually had quite a few family members who tried to dissuade me from studying architecture because of that. But I think it's the type of career that almost chooses you. You don't choose it. So if you love it and you have a passion for it, that can't stop you. You're going to go into it, and you'll make it work. So I mean, I can't imagine myself doing anything else. I'm super happy about it. I think as a young architect, just be a sponge, take in everything you can, learn as much as you can. Just know that also, some of the work you're going to do is going to be the less glamorous, maybe for you less interesting work. But you do need that. It's very important to learn all of that as a base for the rest of your career. So just, be open to it, be willing to do whatever is asked of you, and just learn as much as you can. And then also that aspect of people again. You're going to need to have very good people skills, especially as you progress in your career. So start practicing it now. Watch the colleagues that work with you that you think are good at working in teams, at working with people, and try to see the habits that they have, and try to learn how to do that. And then lastly, maybe just know, especially in difficult times like now, if you've been trained as an architect, you've been trained as a designer, there are so many things that you can do. Buildings are one of them, but, car design, furniture design, industrial design, there are so many things that you can get your hands into. So your options are wide.
So you have a big canvas, and it's your choice what you paint, essentially.
Yes, of course. It's never that easy. It's never that simple. But yes, just know that you've got a great base if you study architecture, and there are a lot of things that you can do. Yeah.
That's great. How was your experience working in England?
It was good. I mean, I worked for a large commercial firm, so I was a very kind of small piece in the whole kind of woodwork. So it was good for the time, and I worked a big portion of that. I worked on a site. Was in a site office, and it was very interesting to see how they do things. Here we have so many people on site. There they have a very smaller amount of people doing different type of work. They don't do brickwork; they do block work, big concrete blocks and things. So it was fun to see how they do things. But I was very glad when I came back to South Africa, and I was ready for a new challenge, actually.
Okay, so you got a different perspective, which I guess is very good. It opens you up.
Yes, it was good, and I'm glad for the time. But I also used a lot of it. I used the time there that I was there to travel through Europe and all of that. So that was a big part of going to England, and I never intended to stay there permanently. Okay. So it was always just a big adventure, and I'm very happy I had it. But I think it did give me a good base when I came back. It got me the job at Paragon, I think, so it was good.
And how has your journey at Paragon been? Since for 15 years, that must have been a great journey, I'm assuming.
It has been. I was very lucky. I mean, I hadn't really started looking around when I came back to South Africa for work. I was just planning on starting to look when I got a call, and I got an interview at Paragon. So they were the first company that I interviewed when I got back, and I got the job offer, and I was worried that, how do you just take the first job that's offered to you? Shouldn't I look around? But it was just a good fit from the beginning. I just got along with the directors very well, and I think we had sort of the same vision. So the company was a lot smaller when I started. It was about 25 people, where we now, kind of 85 or so. So I feel like I grew up with the company. I was made an associate about 3 years after I started there, which was interesting because Anthony and Henning, who owned the company, was used to just being the two of them, and here was this other person, and what exactly is their role and how they're going to fit in there. So it was a bit of a fight we all had to get used to it. But it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. And what I love about Paragon is that we're always changing, we're always adapting, we're always adjusting and seeing what the next thing is. We don't stagnate, which has kept me interested for 15 years.
Awesome. Estelle, thank you so much for your time. I will want to have a part 2 of this interview. Hopefully we can do it sometime soon.
Sure.